guys, and welcome to Socks on a Rooster Furniture Refinishing. My name is Sonja Chandler, and in today's video, I'm going to walk you through a project that includes some of my favorite products, which are gold leaf, Toscana milk paints, and a mesh stencil. We'll be doing them on these three panels here. As you can see, I've already gold leafed the panels. And then the mesh stencil will be an overlay over top, which kind of creates sort of an etched look like you would see on glass, but it's actually going to be on a piece of artwork. So let me show you how I did this. Let's get started.
Okay, so the first step here, guys, was just to protect my painted panel surface, which I had painted a complementary blue here because eventually I was going to paint the frame, or I was going to paint the frame next actually, so I just wanted to cover that up. You can choose a couple of complementary colors there for yourself, but I did the blue on the panel, and then I'm going to paint that frame another color that's going to go right along with it. Okay, right before I started to paint, I just gave it a quick wipe down with the clean slate just to make sure that these were perfectly clean. They're a resin type frame, and I had wiped them down so they were pretty clean, but I just wanted to make sure that I didn't have anything resist my paint. So I went over them one quick time with some clean slate to take off anything that may cause any problems, and then we were ready to paint. Okay, and we're just ready to lay down our coat of One Step. This will give our milk paint something to adhere to. A lot of times when I find a frame or a piece at the thrift store and it has a dark look to it, dark stain, I usually try to utilize that. I like the dark colors under the milk paint. I like for those to kind of come through. But on this particular set of panels, they had resin frames that were really slick, and so I knew the milk paint was just gonna wipe right off of those almost too much. So I tried to be smart about it going forward, and I just did one simple coat, one coat of One Step. You can do two coats if you'd like, but I just did the one knowing that that would help my milk paints to grab on to the frame surface for the next step. So once you can use two coats, but I did one, and then you're ready for your next step. Okay, and once I finished putting that base coat of One Step linen down, I just mixed up my paint colors here to put over those One Step linen, and that way my milk paints will adhere to that. What I'm doing here is just remixing my milk paints. I mixed two colors. One is in Central Park, the other one is Sunday Suppers. I did lighten the Sunday Suppers slightly with some of the color My Linen Apron, just to give it a more taupe look. But the way that I apply milk paint is rather thin. I use it almost as a wash, and that is how I'm able to combat the drips. And since it is very liquid and watery, you can tend to have problems with it, running and kind of getting away from you. So I do a very thin coat, and I just work the color and the paint and the liquid down into the thirsty area of the One Step, and apply just a very thin coat, almost like a wash. I prefer to apply it this way rather than doing it very thick, and then if I need a second coat, I can do that as well. But this is how I combat the pooling and the drips with milk paints, and just make sure that my One Step basically absorbs or drinks up my milk paint. And you can add a second layer if you'd like, but I may just stick with this one and on to the next step. All right, and here is where I decided to add in a layer of Gesso. This is why I love the creative process. Anytime in the process of a project, you can choose to add or take something away. So in between these layers of milk paint, I've got my Central Park laid down here. And now I'm going to add a layer of cracked gesso. So I'm going to put that on over the Central Park before I add the Sunday Suppers color on top of that. And the way I like to do the cracked gesso is I like to do a thin layer over the entire frame, over the entire piece. Whatever it is you're working on, I do a thin layer. And then in the areas that I would like for that cracked gesso to be thicker and to crack away, as it's called cracked gesso, I will lay it thicker in those areas, whether that be on corners or on certain sections. I will add thicker layers there rather than do 2 or 3 very thick layers all over the entire frame. And the reason for that is that the cracked gesso works very different than the cracked patina product. Cracked patina, as soon as you lay on that layer of 1 step over the cracked patina, it's going to crack over the entire surface. But the cracked gesso is it's to be used with milk paints, and the way that it works, it does not crack across the entire surface if you don't have enough layers there. So what I do is I go into particular areas like the corner here, and I'm adding a thicker layer there, as you can see, along the edge there, making it thicker on the corners where an old antique piece may crack, or the cracked gesso that artists used may have done that. Now, my whole first layer of cracked gesso is on. It's a very thin layer, and then now I'm just going to go into particular areas here, and I'm going to lay it on thick right there. And the thicker I lay that on, the easier it is to get that to crack off. And I think that's kind of the confusion with cracked gesso and cracked patina. And now I'm just real quickly going to add my last layer of milk paints, which is Sunday Supper, and then I'm going to move on to the gold leafing. And then here I am starting the gold leafing process. This is probably my favorite step of all. Anybody who knows me knows that I love to add gold leaf to just about any project I can get my hands on. I just tend to think that everything looks better with a little touch of gold. But here I'm laying it down in a different way. Normally gold leaf comes in a bound booklet, and you want to lay those sheets down out of the binding. But I cut my binding off, and I like to lay my sheets individually. Now, just before I started laying these sheets on, I painted down my gilding size, which is an adhesive. It's just basically a glue, and you want that to dry to where it becomes tacky or sticky. So it's not wet at all. It's just when you touch it with your finger, you can feel that it's sticky, as if you were touching the back of a sticker, but not wet at all. And then once it reaches that dry stage, then you can start adding these sheets of gold. And as you can see, I'm just laying them down with the tissue paper on top and trying not to touch the gold leaf with the oils in my hand, so that you don't get any color changes, but you can easily just burnish that on with those tissue papers and get over all of the surfaces. If there's any areas that you missed, just pick up a tiny piece of leaf and press that down into the adhesive. It's easy to just cover the spots that you may have missed, and then make sure it's all rubbed down. Take a dry brush, and then you can remove the rest of the pieces that are not needed there, that are not glued down with the adhesive. And then you have a beautiful gilded panel there that will be ready for the stencil. So again, this is my favorite part. I think everything looks more beautiful with a little touch or little flecks of gold leaf, or maybe a whole panel of gold leaf here. But it adds a lot of texture. The texture of that panel is coming through on the gold, which I love. You can make it very modern, you can make it very old world, but it's really quite beautiful. And now it's ready for the stencil. Okay, and this brings us to the stenciling portion of this project, and another part that's my favorite, but I chose this floral stencil from A Maker Studio because I initially had the idea to kind of have these 3 panels look as if they were one continuous picture, one picture, but they were broken up into 3 panels. So what I needed to do there is, and it's a smaller stencil than the panel, obviously, as you can see. So I started out with it intact, and then I decided to cut up each stem of the flower so that I could do single flowers growing at different levels. And you'll see what I can do, how I did that here. I just trimmed those individually, and so I could use just one flower or one stem of the stencil going all the way up the panel. Now you can use a stencil that is to the size of your panel. It would make it a little easier, although this was not difficult. You just let your last area dry, which it dries very quickly, the gel ink. And then as you can see, there are individual stems there that I've cut up, and then you just place them on the way up. You just go and place them as you would like them. Okay, and as you can see here, I just continued with the stencil upward to the top of the panel, just using individual stems and flowers from this stencil, just carefully placing the gel ink into those particular flowers and stems so that I could carry it all the way up. And then I would take a paintbrush and I would kind of paint in or take my little spreader and make a line to make the stems to the longer flower, so it looked as if they were growing upward. And then I just continued these across the other 2 panels until I had a completed scene or a completed picture all the way across. Okay, and then here we are, guys, with the final product. It's the 3 panels, and as you can see, the stencil is very full in that first panel, and it looks like the flowers are kind of growing into the second panel. And then you can tell that they are kind of moving into the third panel. I love the texture of the gold leaf on the panel. And as you can see there, the last little trail of flowers on that last piece. It's a trio set there, so when you have it on the wall, it's going to show that continuation of the flowers across the whole 3 pieces. But I love that. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you will give this project a try. Have a great day.